Hello everyone, and thank you for coming back to another episode of The Gloving Paradigm. I am your host Peter, aka LPD8 Dubuque, and I just want to say first things first, I would love to thank you everyone who has liked the page so far, and like to thank everyone who's actually interacted with the page. Not only that, and on the Glover's Lounge, anyone who has actually participated on any of the posted topics of discussions that I've posted. This is actually going to be one of the few that I've actually discussed about. I'm going to just start this one off, and we're going to kind of delve deeper into the whole thought process of what I was doing when I asked this question. So the first question I was asking was the age-old debate or debacle, depending on your view, that was happening a few years back, where it was the tech versus flow debate. I actually remember back in 2015, this was probably one of the big talks about tech versus flow. I just know there was a lot of people talking about it, and there was very huge polarizing discussions on it, and where people were just verbally attacking each other about what was better and whatnot. So I asked about this since it's been a few years and anyone has actually talked about it. When we look at this question, and I was asking, what do you think about this? Do you see this as a giant misconception? What are people's thoughts on it? And I had two people who actually wrote back to me and told me these rather good anecdotes. Charles F. wrote, tech and flow are both aspects of a light show. It's like asking when you're baking a cake, do you use flour or sugar? It's a dumb question because if you're lacking in either department, your cake will be awful. Same applies to gloving. And I definitely agree with him, and I do thank you for actually responding and actually giving me some of your input. And then we have Jason W., who also wrote, I really think they're synonymous to each other. Good tech is impossible to achieve without flow, and flow is unimpressive without some good tech. I do agree with both of them in their aspects and in their inputs on that. Where I actually stand on it is this whole idea where this question came up for me was, trying to find a good point to actually really help digest and break down the entire structure of gloving in a way that can actually be a lot more easier for people to understand and actually, not be so overwhelmed with this information. So this episode is pretty much called as the Archetypes of Gloving, basically. And the main thing that we're actually going to be covering in this portion is actually going to be the pillars of the art form. So what do I mean by pillars? Is pretty much a set of archetypes that are synonymous to any form of gloving, really. And it's basically the foundation where gloving is, culminated from. So let me actually kind of help you with what is an archetype. Well, basically an archetype is just a very typical example. So when it comes to the pillars, these four basically are the ones that really kept popping up when a lot of people were discussing about some of this stuff. And so granted, you already know what the first two are, is tech and flow. Since it's not a versus debate thing, this is just more of being what is used to actually foundate your entire craft, basically. So when I was thinking about using archetypes as a way to describe gloving and break it down to make it a lot easier so people can actually get more of a sense of what goes on in the world of gloving, basically. I know the first thing a lot of people are probably thinking to me is well, is this going to be another Magic the Gathering reference, which it's kind of where I got this whole idea from in a way, rather than being, in terms of, what the meta is and all that stuff. It's more of using what they were using as an example to kind of really help. So, you have the pillars of formats, as they would like to say. You have aggro, which are very aggressive styles. And then you have control, which is very slow and, basically want to control everything your opponent's doing until they have nothing more to do and you have complete control of the game. And then you also have combo, which is, a set of combinations of things that you put together to win the game. Granted, there's a natural balance to that, but, that doesn't apply here when it comes to gloving. So I'm actually using the models of, aggro, control, combo as, being pillars of any format. But instead of being formats in terms of gloving, it's just more, these are the foundations of gloving itself. So when we talk about tech, a lot of people kind of interchange the meaning of the word tech. There's technicality, there's technology, there's technique, and it just depends on where you're using it. Because I know a lot of people will be like, well, where are you going with this? Well, there's a lot of people who say, oh, I really like techie shows, or I really, really like flowy shows, or I like a lot of shows with the other two subjects, which I'll cover here in a little bit. So these are just, dynamics in the gloving spectrum, basically, that I feel, every new glover should actually, get some understanding of and utilize not only one or the other, but to try to utilize all of them in tandem with each other. So of course you got tech, which is, in my opinion, when it comes to the definition of tech, is literally the best way I can put it is you're just pretty much precise and clean when you're coming to your movements, and that your finger placements and the angles that your fingers are making, or your hands or your arms are making, everything has to be perfectly straight lines. Everything needs to be clean. The motions that you're doing, your tracing, have to be extremely clean and noticeable, and it all has to make sense. So that's where the tech portion in terms of that pillar is just simply being extremely precise, and your placements and all your angles and everything is exactly where it needs to be. Now, a good example of what tech would be described as outside of gloving, in my opinion, let's actually move to dance. So we actually consider ourselves a dance art form. Look at ballroom dancing, for example. It's not necessarily something of artistic flair, basically, but it's just a simple sequence of steps that you have to do. And not only that, when especially it comes to competitions in ballroom, you don't have any room for creative flair, like placing, whatever freestyle move that you want to do. No. With competitive ballroom dancing, you have to have your body in a very simple position. You have to have your head in a simple position. Everything, your lines have to make complete, exact positions that you have to make. And then your feet have to be in the right place. Your feet have to be pointed at a certain point, and they have to be pointed the right way. So when you look at ballroom is pretty much very quote unquote techie, being very technical, because if you look at the definition of technicality, it's just simply describing something being technical. So that's where I try to kind of break down tech, is when you think about tech, you got to think something like ballroom dancing in a sense, because even outside of competitive sense, there's no real creative flair that ballroom gets to have. Like, there's no real plays or operas or any performances that they really get to have. Now, I know everyone's probably gonna be like, well, what do you talk about all those movies that they had with Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly and all that. Yeah, I understand that, and that's that's going into choreography, and that allows for creative expression. However, when we're just talking about ballroom as a whole, it's just basically steps. And where I'm getting my credits from in this case, my husband was actually a competitive ballroom dancer, and I've asked him many, and I mean many questions about what everything about ballroom, and like how it was for him when he was competing, and how are you supposed to handle yourself and all these things. And this is how he described it to me. It's you're doing steps, and you're not really doing anything creative. You're not not like how gloving competitions are, is where you watch somebody do something really cool, and then you have to like try to one up him and try to get higher points. With ballroom is you have to make the same look, and every position has to be the same, and it has to be quote unquote proper in order to actually get the points. So if that kind of helps you make sense of that, I really try to do my best to try to explain it. So when it comes to gloving, what is probably the best simple example in terms of the tech pillar would be the grid. And the reason why I chose the grid is because if you think about it, you have this imaginary XYZ axis grid in front of you, a giant cube with little mini cubes in it. The best way I always tell people is to imagine a Rubik's Cube, but instead of being a 3x3, just imagine a much bigger one that have all equal spacings. And you have to have a point on your grid that you're either going to move to, move around, or move through, and then you can move that point any which way you want. Well, to me, that takes a lot of technical precision to actually really make that look very real and very clean for the viewer. So, and that's, it's not like saying, oh, tutting is only tech and liquid's not tech. It's to me, it was like the most generic way to put it in terms of what it looks like tech and gloving. So with that being said, we're gonna actually move on a little bit to flow, and actually try to explain flow in a much probably a much easier way. So when it came to flow, I know a lot of people would just say, your moves have to just seem to quote unquote flow with each other and things like that. But I'm kind of actually going on a broader sense, and there was always something my mom always told me, is that when it comes to her work as a paralegal, how she's supposed to write her things are not supposed to feel like there's taking any breaks. And as she likes to say, when it comes to the term flow, is that it literally, the piece of work, whether it be the performance and gloving, or in my mom's case, any of her work that she has to do in terms of statements and stuff, she has to articulate it in a way that it just carries the reader through. And that's the same thing that applies to gloving, is that flow is supposed to be whatever your show and performance is doing, everything just needs to be like carrying the viewer throughout the entire performance, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't even stop. And that's the best way I can say it, is you can't be any like little breaks or anything that makes it feel kind of conjointed when it comes to your show. And that's the best way I can actually put it for you guys. So it's not like that you need this whole bell curve or anything. It's just your transitions and everything needs to make sense to the point where your viewer is not trying to work on like how to make sense of where you're going with it. It just literally carries you through without them having to put much effort into enjoying the show, basically. And a good example of that, when we go back to dance, the Vietnamese waltz, which is part of the ballroom archetype, and it's a 3-step dance, but however, when it comes to the appearance of Vietnamese waltz, is that you're supposed to look literally like a cloud floating around the stage, and there's not supposed to be any stops. So you can't like make this big swing up and then swing back down like you're on a half pipe kind of motion. It literally has to flow one continuous motion throughout the entire piece. And I know a lot of people probably haven't even watched any of the ballroom dances or even watched any dancing competitions. I highly should suggest you do, because we are a dance art form, and why not use the mentalities of other dance forms to actually adopt into our own. And that's pretty much how I'm going to go about doing this, is use other dance forms to kind of help make sense. So when you actually watch a true Vietnamese waltz, you're going to see the female partner floating, literally appearing to be floating across the stage. Her dress is supposed to just be frilling, and there's this never stopping 90-degree turns, stop and turn type deal. It's this complete, just everything flows and it doesn't look like it ever stops. So that's pretty much how I'm going about it, and I hope that actually kind of makes sense to you. If it doesn't, please let me know so I can actually try to make a little bit more sense for you. So the next pillar of the entire archetypes of gloving and its foundation is musicality. And I know I covered this on my 4th episode a little bit, but I kind of just want to touch on it a little bit more and say, with your movements and your transitions and everything, it does have to really evoke what the music is being portrayed. Your interpretation maybe, or you're using the music to help tell your story based on what the music is playing. A lot of dance studios and a lot of choreographers use music in one way or another to either be a literal interpretation of what's going on, or just more of an adaptation to the entire piece performance to really help convey the message that they're getting across. To me, in terms of dance, what really shines in my eyes in terms of musicality to really evoke the music is contemporary dancing. And I know I might get shot in the foot for this, but hear me out. When it comes to contemporary dancing, it's more of your shapes that your body can create to evoke the emotions and the feelings that you're getting from the music. And I know a lot of people would watch a lot of contemporary and be like, wow, they're listening to a lot of depressing music. I would disagree with you. However, a lot of powerful pieces come out of the contemporary dance scene, and I feel like contemporary literally hallmarks the whole idea of what musicality is all about. And that's kind of one of the things that we are actually adapting into our work as glovers, is using musicality to help evoke our emotions and try to really express ourselves to the viewer. And of course, if you listen to the beginning, the basic music understandings, you'll see how I help people really just learn to listen to the music and go on from there. So the 4th pillar that I'm actually going to cover. I know not a whole lot gets talked about it, but there are people out there who do talk about it a lot. And it's one that just kept popping up for me every time I just kept looking through Glover's Lounge in the art of gloving, is showmanship. So basically the showmanship part is more of, your ability to draw attention to yourself. It's not, like a set thing of moves and things like that, right? Showmanship is literally the flair that you bring to your own show that really helps draw your viewers' attention. Because I can certainly tell you from my own experience, when I was given a show sometimes when I was going to Electric Kingdom and Flagstaff at the Green Room, I've actually had people ask for a show and I'm giving them the show and they're on their phone doing whatever they're doing on it, and oh my gosh, can I not tell you enough how much that actually just drives me up the wall. It's like, best way I can describe it, that is like when somebody walks into a Subway and they come up to the line and the person who's working the Subway line is saying, "Hi, how can I help you?" And you are not on your phone, but you get them started and then they move down the line and you're on your phone all of a sudden and they ask you what else, and then the person who's on the phone sticks their fingers up and tells the person who's making their sandwich to hold on. Like, oh my god, are you serious? So when it comes to showmanship, you gotta, it's one of those very loose, in my opinion, it's one of those loose things that we haven't really got patented down. But when it comes to showmanship, you definitely got to have some form of creative flair that really makes you stand out from other people. Now, I know this is very subjective. However, in my opinion, when it comes to showmanship, you do what you think you feel is best for your show. And at the end of the day, if you actually feel comfortable with what you did and you felt like you had, your showmanship going in terms of your own creative flair, of drawing attention to what you're doing, especially when it comes to drawing attention, because for the sake of what gloving is to entertain. And showmanship also imparts onto things of like information, like a lecture hall or whatnot. A really good example, in my opinion, when it comes to showmanship is when you look at the cabaret, pretty much dance scene, where you got Broadway, you got not really necessarily jazz as much as I like to put that with it, but no, you got cabaret itself, you got burlesque, you got the can. These are all things in terms of magnifying the flair of drawing the attention for the entertainment point. You got to have a big show going, if you think about it. So you have those basically as your dance forms, and if you look at street magic, that's all about showmanship. You have to draw attention to whatever you're doing, in terms of either misdirecting, sleight of hand, disappearing acts, whatever the case may be. You have to look at showmanship in terms of like doing a magic show. They have to have that level of showmanship to actually draw the attention of the viewers to a point where they need to do whatever they need to do to actually fulfill the magic act, right? That's how you gotta kind of look at showmanship when it comes to gloving. Basically, is kind of like look at how Broadway and burlesque dancing and cabaret dancing and the can, how it's all about just drawing attention for the pure sport of entertainment, basically. What I actually chose in terms of what are really good examples in terms of gloving of each of these pillars are just ones that I know that when I watched it, I can actually really feel that aspect or that pillar of the gloving art form. So if you actually look up ID Aku Custom Glove Light Show, that was something that was probably 4 or 5 years ago that got posted. That is probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest examples of flow to ever be witnessed. That show, all his moves and everything he's doing, it just carried you through the entire piece of music that you're listening to, and just a wonderful display of what people would consider as flow. So when it comes to tech, another good example of a light show that I find that I always tend to go back to when I want to look at how to be very quote-unquote techie or very, very precise is SS Buddha Dreamcaster glove light show. That's probably a good example. That to me is a really good example, at least, of what tech is. He's you can see how he's being very precise with his fingers, with his dials, and where he's placing everything. Not only that, when he's actually doing, like whips and flails or any, kind of liquidy motion, it's, very quick, but you can still see the precision it takes to use that motion to get to the point where he needs to be to continue. And another great example in terms of musicality is, well, pretty much anything of Blitzen you could probably use, because she's really good at musicality in my opinion. But one that I really felt like she really helped showcase how musicality is supposed to be performed is her Team E, LJ, Blitzen, Subsonic Love Light show. This is all the stuff you can actually find on YouTube, by the way. That, to me, she just has a really good example with how to indicate and predict the beats. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure she's listened to that song hundreds of times before, but with that as an example, you can actually really adapt to that and be able to learn over time of how to actually predict your music. Again, I also will say, listen to episode 4, please, so you actually know where I'm coming from. And of course, in my opinion, a really good example of showmanship in terms of gloving would actually be PM Fry's Prism Glove Light show video that you will find on YouTube. To me, especially when it comes to conjuring and impacts, that is pretty much the best example of showmanship in gloving. And the reason is because, when you look at conjuring as a whole, they're manipulating their lights by turning on and off, and they're doing kind of like a little magic show. They actually have to have a really good sense of showmanship to draw attention to these parts that they're doing, so for the sake of entertaining their viewer, but also to help the viewer make sense of it all. I'm not going to sit here and tell you which one is better in terms of conjuring or impacting. I find both of them to have very huge, different dynamic points of views, basically. They're just very different. They're very different in their dynamic, okay? If I would say conjuring is pretty much the umbrella archetype, that makes sense to me, because if you look at just conjuring as the definition is just simply manipulating your lights, for the sake of your show. And impacting, in a sense, is conjuring in the simplest form, in my opinion. Now, before all the impactors out there start shooting me in the foot because I just said that, hear me out. I'm just saying, as an objective point of view, when you look at impacting, yes, you're simply just using your thumbs, but the whole dynamic of using your thumbs is different than how conjuring use the rest of their hands, basically. Now, I know some impactors are going to say, well, I don't only use my thumbs, and I definitely understand that. However, your main point is to use your thumbs, and you display, the lights that you're using on your thumbs in a very dynamic way. Now, that's what really pushes you away from the rest of the conjuring world, because it's taken on its own form, and it has its own set of, its own paradigm within the conjuring archetype, basically. So, if that's all making sense to you, I really hope it does, but I'm just kind of putting that out there for you. I'm not saying that, conjuring and impacting are the same. It's like a jacuzzi, okay? It's, jacuzzis are all hot tubs, but not all hot tubs are jacuzzis. Impacting is conjuring, but not all conjuring is impacting, if that makes sense to you. So, not trying to discredit any dance form in terms of the gloving community. I am just simply trying to help bring a more cohesive thought process and a more cohesive picture to a new person who's coming into gloving. And this is pretty much the best way I can do it. And that is pretty much the end of my episode right there for you guys. I really hope you guys actually watch these videos if you haven't seen them. I know a lot of them are pretty old, and I don't think a lot of new glovers have seen them, so I'll actually put these in the description of my episode, so that when you guys actually want to look it up, you'll actually just need to copy and paste, and boom, you should have it right there. But I definitely want to hear everything you guys have to say. I do once again thank everybody who has participated so far in all the questions I've asked throughout the Glover's Lounge and throughout the Art of Gloving. I do highly appreciate everybody who has liked my page so far. Please spread the word that I'm out here trying to help people out. It's one of the things I've been enjoying so far. You can hit me up at my email at muttonchopguy@gmail.com. You can, that way you can personally talk to me. If you actually have Discord, you can actually get onto my Discord server, which I will have the link in that, the link to that in the description of this episode as well. And you can always hit me up on my page at The Gloving Paradigm on Facebook. Those are my 3 main outlets. I really hope more people actually get onto the Discord server, because it would actually be more great to actually, post things on there and actually discuss with people, face to face that way. And as you guys probably know from my video announcement that I am moving, yes, I am moving to Reno, Nevada. My husband just accepted a job there, and I feel how things are turning out, we're going to be there by the end of this month. Does that mean I will have a house by then? Maybe. I really hope so, because I know my husband is just not a huge fan of doing storage units. However, just taking the circumstances between making a deposit in his first month's rent payment there, while also trying to cover a huge payment in rent here, on top of all the utilities and shutting those off and shutting them on as I'm rambling on here. I don't know why. Yeah, it's just gonna be a little bit crazy. So I really hope you guys actually just give me as much feedback as you want. You know, if you guys just think that my show is terrible, I would love to know why. So I can actually try to improve on it, and just let me know what you guys are looking for. Clearly, just from seeing what happened on episode 4 being very, very low in terms of view counts, really kind of shows me that you guys are not really interested in learning about music, because the majority of you probably already have a good, strong understanding about music anyways, but that's totally fine. So once again, I am your host, Peter, aka LPD8 Dubuque, and I'll see you guys all next week.